to introduce Kate Herbert, our esteemed reporter on all things theatrical. Hello, Kate. Welcome back.
Hello there. Thank you. So we've got a couple of things to speak about today. Shakespeare, Bell Shakespeare, King Lear, which is frequently performed, a frequently performed tragedy, because it is one of the most famous and one of the strongest of the plays.
Well, it's one of those test pieces, isn't it, that for what do you do with Shakespeare? What do you do with Lear? Who do you cast in the main role? Because it's been done so many different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not one that's often transposed into other contexts. Often it's done in this sort of neutral, as Peter Evans' production for Bell is in a non-specific time period. The set design even is completely neutral. It's rather beautiful. Anna Triglowan has done I think they're copper sheets hanging. I don't know how to describe them. They do like a walkerboard sort of sound as well when they're hit. And the floor is also polished coppery. So it's very abstract and surreal. It's a play that always garners comparison with previous versions and interpretations, and we've seen quite a few. In fact, John Bell himself did two different versions, 98 and some other time. Barry Kosky had a controversial interpretation, that might have been 98. Evelyn Crape played a female Lear for Melbourne Shakespeare Company, COVID period, bit after. My favourite is the Ruster Valley Theatre. I'll talk about that if we have a moment. Wonderful. Lear was a despot in that. But Evans captures what I believe is the tragedy of the two elderly fathers, and that seems to be the thing that holds this production together. King Lear is Robert Menzies, who I just find marvellous to watch. I've always loved him, and his Lear is frail and beleaguered and tortured, and but he's also narcissistic and vengeful, so that becomes very clear. And the venom and vitriol that he directs at his two disloyal daughters comes to the forefront, really, and he delivers that poetic text with nuance and a great deal of skill. But James Lugton is Lear's trusty, loyal friend, Duke of Gloucester. He is also noble and dignified, and he has a wonderful command of the language. And his torture scene, the terrible eye gouging scene, elicits gasps from the audience. It was a bit bloody. It was probably the most graphic. As I said, it's not usual for it to be transposed into different locations and times. But the main point about Lear is that it's a tragedy about a man who believes he has power until he loses it. And he believes he has love until he realises he hasn't.
And he exercises power in the most intimate and destructive ways.
Absolutely, yes. And he believes he has loyalty until that deserts him as well. And so there he is, this mad king roaming through the wilderness and the storm with his fool, who is, it appears, wiser than he is. Now, what's interesting about this production, or less interesting, I suppose, is the other cast who do have a grasp of the language, but are not necessarily working the depth and layers of their characters. And so it feels a bit like the other characters, apart from Kent, the Duke of Kent, played by a woman who is, I'll have to come back to that, sorry, I haven't got the name in front of me, rather interesting version of Kent, who is sort of, acerbic and stroppy, combative. I think the rest of the characters don't quite hit that level. The Goneril and Regan characters, the other two daughters, the two who are really disloyal and their obsequious flattery at the beginning, I love you more than the world, etc., turns into essentially, well, we've got the power now with our husbands, so you can sort of go jump and you don't get any retainers, go play in the storm. Cordelia, the loyal daughter, Melissa Carawan.
Nothing will come from nothing.
Yes, all of that. And he meets with poor Tom Edgar in the storm. Cordelia, often double cast with the fool. That happens here too with Melissa Caraman.
So the same person's playing
both. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The problem for me was that they felt like the same voice, even though the text is different with the fool. So although they have the rest of the cast has a clear understanding of the text, it's just there's some unevenness in the performance.
There was a bit with Midsummer Night's Dream. There was some strange casting and cross-gender casting stuff, which also worked a bit weird.
Yeah, it happens with their smaller touring productions, I think. I just have to briefly, before I move on to the other play called English, talk about the Robert Sturura production for Ruster Valley Theatre that I saw years ago with the entire cast of lords and courtiers are lined up like a parade ground waiting for Lear, and it's 8 minutes of silence, Nick. 8
Good
minutes.
Lord, yes.
I've had one experience of that with a Belgian dance company. Lear arrives, they're all in greys, etc. Albany faints in the middle of this 8 minutes, and they pick him up. Come on, get yourself together. In comes Lear, playfully, sort of, with a canary in a cage, and Cordelia dancing around him, a child like Cordelia. It was compelling. 8 minutes of... Oh, and the design was littered with implements of torture. So he's a despot, a tyrant. Was extraordinary. I can't
so
even
you can
begin to
do
explain
things
it.
with Lear.
You
can do anything with Shakespeare, really, but sometimes things don't quite... Well, did you get a sense before we wrap up on Lear that everyone knew what they were aiming for?
In the cast, do you mean?
Yeah, for the whole production. You knew what they were trying to get across.
I don't know that is the case, but it's hard for me. I can't get inside their heads. I'm not certain what the intention was with this production,
thing,
but for me it was about the two old men and their loss of their position and dignity
Still
and love.
Worth seeing?
I think so.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so. So my other is, I just saw it last night, so I will talk about that. It's called English. It was a Pulitzer Prize, or is a Pulitzer Prize winner from last year, 2023, by Sanaz Toussi, who is an Iranian-American writer. So in a classroom in Iran, Marjan, an Iranian woman, teaches English as a foreign language. I have friends who've done that too, to 4 adult Farsi speakers. So they are...
Which
one of
is
them,
basically Persian.
Yes, Persian.
I'm sure everyone knows
yes,
that, but
indeed.
just in case.
Persian language, sorry. She insists they speak English only, which is very common, total immersion in that classroom. And any breach of that rule attracts a penalty. She puts a little cross on their whiteboard. Total immersion, only way to learn a language. I went through that in Italy. So it's not a grand play that deals with explosive or highly dramatic issues that you might expect from one set in Iran and written by an American Iranian. You'd think there'd be some political stuff. None. Zero. Just a sense that these people want to get to another country, and for different reasons. All for different reasons. And their relationship to their culture and their language is really interesting. That is the key. Even Marjan, the teacher who's lived for 8 years in Manchester but returned to Iran, feels lost in the cracks between two cultures and two languages now. So she's losing a grip on where her identity is. And what it talks about a lot, these people come to the class and a couple are really keen on English and some feel completely alienated and angry about it and hate it but need to learn it to go and study in another country, at RMIT, in fact, one of them. But the younger one, Goli, she's cheerful, she's optimistic and eager and quick to learn, and she's got her life ahead of her. Everything. Failure doesn't even enter into it. Roya, an older woman, wants to learn English so she can go to live with her family and talk to her granddaughter. And there's a very stroppy, ambitious young woman called Elham who she says it makes her feel stupid.
So what was the impact of this on you?
I think what it touched for me was the sense of language and identity. And when one doesn't have a connection with a place, a culture and a language, one loses one's identity.
And how were the performances? It's all in English.
Beautiful,
I assume,
yeah. There's a little bit of Persian at the end. It's a beautiful, beautiful language. When they're speaking Persian, you hear them in fluent English. Then they have faltering English. But it's beautiful performances and delicate and sensitive exploration of language and identity. I think.
Who's putting that on and where?
It's an MTC, and it's at the Sumner at the South Bank Theatre.
Well, that sounds wonderful too. Productions worth seeing. Thank you very much for wrapping them up with us, Kate, and we'll see you in a fortnight after you've been to lots more plays. And I think we could go to this is a piece of music.